Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining, those of you who are with us live, as well as those of you who are watching this after the fact. We're super excited today to have Charisse Poole with us to talk a little bit about mental health and caregiving. I think it's a super important topic that probably requires much more than an hour session. But we're going to start here, and hopefully we'll have Charisse back in the future to continue the conversation. But yeah, you saw a little bit about Charisse. I don't know, Charisse, if you want to say anything that we didn't capture in your bio this afternoon. It was pretty comprehensive, yeah.
I'm Charisse. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been 15 years, almost 15 years in the field. Most recently, 7 to 8 years in geriatrics. Have a lot of background in working with caregivers, Alzheimer's Association, and even being a personal caregiver to my mother. So it's not just business; it's personal.
Mm-hmm. And that's how it is for all of us here at Prognosis, the community health worker team that we have, as well as kind of our executive team, working on creating the educational materials and hosting these spaces many days a week now as we grow for our caregivers. We're all also people who have both what we call lived and learned experience, and I think that
Yes.
both are a kind of expertise that are absolutely like vital, I think. So yeah, I think really important for this conversation too, that we both come, I think, wearing both of those kinds of hats. So today we wanted to talk about mental health. Specifically, we had some topics that we wanted to cover in this conversation, um, having to do with our ability to actually kind of put boundaries in place to protect our peace. um, how do we even do that? What are some of the barriers to doing that for that are common for caregivers? How do we nurture our own emotional well-being in a disease that is emotionally taxing, that is physically taxing, that is socially taxing, that is financially taxing? How do we take care of our emotional selves in all of that? um, Let me see if we can go back to that screen for a second. Yep. We also wanted to make sure that we cover the difference between the kind of support that you can get with Prognosis, which is community support. It's kind of like a group, right, that comes together and you really learn from one another, which can be very valuable, and individual therapy. And when is it that we like, what are kind of the signs, what are the red flags, as it were, to tell us we need to do something beyond this group? It's not even group therapy, right? It's like a support group. It's a peer group. So when do we know that that's not enough for us? And when might someone, in other words, go to someone like you, Charisse, as a therapist to pursue individual therapy? Or you might even want to touch upon therapy that happens in groups or in families, for instance. That also, I think, can be pretty helpful in some circumstances. So yeah, let's start there. Like wherever you want to start on any of those topics, we can just dive in. And I'm sure I'll have a lot of other questions. If we have questions from the audience, maybe we can take some of those as well.
Yeah. Let's kick it off with boundaries. I'm a boundaries guru because it's just very important in our lives, and we don't even realize it. And at times, we don't even realize that we lack boundaries, especially as a caregiver. I mean, because typically, you're just thrown into that situation, or circumstances place you in that situation. And so you just kind of do and you go, and you just say yes to everything because, you have to get it done, right? And so boundaries is very, 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 very. If you don't leave this platform today without learning anything, boundaries is important. Boundaries is freedom and love. Why do I say that? Because it protects what you value, right? And so what you value is important to you. So, and what happens when we lack boundaries is that we either allow not only other people to determine what that looks like, but even ourselves, right? And so we have to be consistent with that because when we don't have boundaries, then we're allowing other people to dictate basically what we value, right? And who wants to do that, right? We should always, move forward and walk through life with what we believe is important. And sometimes, and sometimes in seasons, right, especially in caregivers, it's hard to kind of prioritize what you value because you're focusing on that other person. But it's very important, and not only just boundaries with yourself, but boundaries with others, but with yourself as well. So not just saying no to people, but knowing how to say yes to love and support, especially through the caregiving process, and also yes to yourself and making sure that you're getting what you need on top of you caring for somebody else's needs.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We are often talking about in prognosis because we try to, tackle all of these things from kind of like a culturally fluent lens. We also talk about, reaching people in their language. This is obviously in English, but we also have a lot of material that we put out there in Spanish and some in Korean and in Chinese. And I think in all of those cultures and all of those language communities, there are different ideas about like who is responsible for caregiving,
Mm, mm-hmm,
different
mm-hmm,
expectations about who those individuals are. And I will say, I think in all of those cultures, there is a disproportionate expectation that women do that labor.
mm-hmm.
And so, I wanted to ask you if have you noticed anything in particular about women specifically feeling this burden of like, I have to do this. I'm not worthy if I don't fulfill this expectation. Has that been something that you see in your practice?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Most of the caregivers I see are women. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, because think about it. We're naturally nurturers. We're naturally caregivers as a gender, right? As a culture, being a female, and so it's just naturally for us to want to say, "Let me, care for you," right? And so it's cultural, that because typically when and it depends on the culture, right, and what the role of the male is supposed to be. But typically, in most cultures, females are seen as caregiving, whether it's the title is that, but the role that we play is typically a caregiver.
So
Whether that,
how do we manage that? Like how do we navigate that when there's this like overwhelming thing, like this pressure, right? A lot of times we've internalized that pressure too, right? We really don't see ourselves as being good people unless we do those things, right? And
yeah,
um how have you seen people navigate that?
yeah. So, are you talking about from a woman's perspective,
It can be
or is
cultural,
it?
it can be gender, yeah, from just those aspects of identity where like
Mm,
that is what is making you feel like you have to do this work in a particular way, and it
mm-hmm,
doesn't allow you to honor the boundaries that you might have otherwise because you're like, no, but I have to, and I
mm-hmm,
have to do all of this, right? Like,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's when you need therapy, right? Because it's deeper than just you playing that role. And a lot of times we can, I can even talk about guilt. A lot of times we're motivated by guilt, and so that comes from a place. That comes from what the authors of the Boundaries book titles as internal parent, right? And so these standards that you have grown up with and have your parents have influenced you with, you're moving through life with those same ideas, right? And so you're a whole grown person still, navigating with those same standards. And of course, as I just said, seasons change, life changes, circumstances changes, and so sometimes we have to shift with that too. And so, when I do work with clients, we talk through that, right? And you bring up the identity piece. So not just navigating through the guilt, because the guilt connects to my internal parent, but also learning to how to separate those standards and creating your own for the circumstance, right? Like
mhm,
we can pull out values that we have from our parents and our childhood and things like that that will work for us well. But when it comes to a space of it's harmful that I'm moving and acting, because we don't ever want to make decisions out of guilt, right?
mhm,
We want to make decisions out of love, which is what boundaries is about, right? And so walking through that identity piece is very, 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 very important. And so only a therapist can help you explore that, right? Like, who are
mhm,
you outside of caregiving? Where did you first, feel like you had to be responsible? Because sometimes when you talk about women, there's parentification, which means that when I was a kid, I had to grow up fast, right? I was
mhm,
5 years old, cooking and care, like, and so, knowing having someone to be able to draw those things out and connect those dots on the root of why I feel guilty and why, who am I outside of this, and kind of rebuilding and redefining that within the context of your caregiver role.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, so important. And we've seen actually, I think multiple instances where our caregivers have shared with us very freely that like they benefits tremendously. They come to our groups and they feel that they benefit from our groups and having that peer support, but they also state unequivocally, like, it is so important for me to have access to that therapy additionally to go deeper, right, on the issues, exactly the issues that you're talking about. And I think that's useful for people to hear. I think still there is like a tremendous amount of stigma, not just on the topic of dementia, but also on the topic of like emotional care for the caregiver, right? And I don't know. I think before I started the work that I'm doing right now in supporting caregivers, it was not totally apparent to me that I really think like every day that more that I do this work, it's, I think at least 95% of the challenges that people are really grappling with are emotional, are social. They are not the other things that you might imagine, which are also really, really difficult, right? Like this disease costs $300,000 on average for people, right? That is no joke. That itself, I think, will also produce a lot of stress and emotional turbulence. But there's so many things having to do with like your relationship with this person, right? Like the kind of history that you have with them, the baggage that might be there, how you're having to rethink how you engage with someone who is actively changing, right? Yeah, that piece, like I see everybody uniformly, like that is like the thing that I thought that in these sessions, these caregiver check-in sessions, I thought that like the focus would be largely like practical questions people have and resource questions, maybe medical or scientific questions. No, at least 95% of the conversation is emotional and social, both. Yeah.
Because you think about the level of what you're doing, and also what's not talked about either is role reversal, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
like, I started out, let's say a couple, let's say now a wife has to take care of her husband. I'm normally, the one that makes sure the home is good. But now I'm taking care of my husband. Now I got to worry about the bills. Now I got to worry about how the grass is getting cut. Now I got to worry about who's gonna fix stuff. Like, and so
Mm-hmm.
that, and then you talk about the financial stress. I mean, there's so many layers of stress and changes that happen in that process. And so, yeah, it's an emotional process. And so, again, we jump into it, or we get into it and we just do it because that's naturally what we're doing. But we don't even think about and stop and realize the emotional impact that it's having. And
Mm-hmm.
another way that you can tell that you need therapy is when the weight gets heavy. Because when you first start out, it might be a crisis or it may just be, depending on the circumstance. But as things roll and as things worsen, just be real, it gets heavy, and
Yeah.
so when it gets heavy, you can't carry that. We're not meant to live life by ourselves and alone and to carry a burden by ourselves, right? And
Right.
so, you need someone, of course, community and all of that. Like we want a whole what we call a hula hoop. So that means we want
Mm-hmm.
a whole, well-rounded type of support. So not just a support group, neighbors, right? If
Yeah.
my loved one is wandering out and down the street, I need a neighbor to say, "Oh, hey, that's so and so. Let me, call me up and let me know." Even EMS. I was doing a care partner group, and someone said that they were close to the EMS, so they could call them up, not through 911, but had a relationship with them to know, hey, this is just so so like
Yeah.
that is important,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. It's yeah, I don't know. It's like it's so challenging to be. I mean, I have not yet been a primary caregiver, so I've been in the support capacity for
Mm,
multiple people over many years in my family. And
mm,
even there, just being kind of like, I don't know, vicariously experiencing what is going on, or the few times that I've been able to step in because now the caregiver who has like very commonly not taken care of themselves.
mm-hmm,
And so something has now happened to them. And then now the
mm-hmm,
person who is receiving care from them is, not accompanied. And
mm-hmm,
um, it's even just those little windows into like how challenging this is as a 24/7 365 endeavor, even when the person that you are caring for is ostensibly easy, right?
mm-hmm,
Even when they're easy. And I will say a lot of the time they are not easy. You know,
Mm-hmm.
with dementia, at some point, many of our loved ones get confused about where they are. They may wander, they may become very agitated. There's a lot of acting out because their ability to communicate, declines with the
Mm-hmm.
disease. And it's just so frustrating. And then I think if you layer on top of that the fact that there is already this history there, so it's not like you're
Yeah.
walking in and this is like a client of yours, right?
Yeah.
Like, no, you already have a relationship with the goods and the bads, the highs
Mm-hmm.
and the lows, already baked in. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that makes it really challenging to like respond in a way that is consistently, always like kind of like super compassionate,
Mm-hmm.
like the best way you would love to respond ideally. It's hard to do.
Yeah, and
It,
the thing with that is grace. It's grace. You're not perfect. And you're not gonna be the perfect caregiver. And so again, back to that emotional impact. Grace. If you snap, that's it's okay. Because you're
Mhm.
human, right? Now, again, so back to therapy. We need you to be in a space where, because I always like to use this. These may be corny, but it's like when you get on a plane and they say, if the mask drop, you put it on yourself first,
Yep.
right? Before you help the other person. And so if you want to be I won't say effective caregiver, but if you want to be an impactful caregiver in a healthy way, you have to take care of your emotions too. And so, but also showing yourself grace when you're not always happy. It's not a happy journey. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
it's gonna be some frustrations. It's gonna be some anger. It's gonna be some irritability. It's gonna be some stress. It's gonna be times of joy. It's gonna be time. It's just a mixture of
Hmm.
things, and all of those can exist in the same space. That's the thing too. Like we don't have to feel like I have to be joyful about this all the time, and I don't have to feel like I'm always angry. Frustrated all the time. It's just showing grace to your in self compassion to yourself to say, hey, this is a process. We're all going through it. Even a person, your loved one who is diagnosed, they're also going through changes too. Imagine the emotions that they're feeling, right? And so, and then that's another layer. I'm having to hold space for that too, and my own emotions. And so that's where therapy comes in at, because you can learn how to kind of navigate through that situation by situation, because you can always expect the unexpected, right? And so
Yeah.
you really never know what to expect. But if you can to learn how to be able to, one, recognize what you're feeling, and two, what to do with it when you feel it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Another question that I had about boundaries is I do see, because I've seen now so many caregivers through our support groups, and as I said, I've seen it in my family way too many times as well, personally. I do see a bit of what I would say is a little kind of perfectionistic, which is
Mm.
like, I have to do it in this way. And it's like when I look at it from the outside, I'm like, wow, that do you have to do it
Do
that
you
way?
have to,
Because
right?
that is a lot. Like, I mean, from my perspective, it's like, why are you choosing to do it like that? Because that is a lot. And, there are explanations like, well, they would have only liked it this way. Right. And like, so how do you deal with that? Like, as a therapist, when you see that, what is your advice? Like, how do you help them like
You
manage
know,
that?
you know what that is? That's control.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
That's control. Because, and then it goes back to emotional. When you are not dealing with your emotions, you're letting things pile up. And so, because I don't really necessarily have control in this situation, I'm going to try to find any little way that I can feel secure in the situation, right? And so that may be just in little things like, she wants it exactly like this, like, no, that's control. The other thing with perfection is that, let's talk about vulnerability, right? Vulnerability is allowing myself to be seen. Brene Brown does some good work on that. She has a TED talk on that that I give to clients.
Mm,
And when you are allowing yourself to be seen, others to see you, that removes a layer. You can't be perfect, because then people see the good and the bad. People are seeing things that aren't perfect about you, right? And so this layer of perfection is really, what are you hiding behind that layer of perfection, right? And so when you are vulnerable, you're allowing other people to see you, and when other people see you, then they can support you. So then
mm,
we go into, I'm doing all this because I'm blocking other people out. I'm trying to do everything perfect, when in actuality, if I'm vulnerable and I allow people to see that there are some weaknesses and errors in this process, or even in my own, how I feel about myself and being a caregiver, other people can see that. And when other people see that, if you have the right support around you, they can say, hey, I see you. Can I help with that? Like you can elicit support that way. But if I have a wall up through perfection, then yeah, I'm trying to control it. So one, releasing control, and two, being vulnerable so I can allow other people in to help me so that you don't have to feel like you have to have control over everything.
Yeah. I never really thought about the relationship between that perfectionism and not allowing people to help. But it's also true that those individuals who are very particular about like, no, it has to be done like this.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else can do it like this. I'm the only one, right? Like, yeah, they don't have help, right? Like they never have
Because
help.
they ain't gonna let nobody help. Because
Yeah.
they want to, I can do it better than them. So I'm going to just do it
Yeah.
myself. But then you driving yourself crazy.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. Wow. And I also wonder, like, is it a pattern of behavior that happens when people, I don't know, have like some kind of unresolved relational issues with the people that they're caring for, where they feel like driven to do that, or not necessarily?
Mm-hmm.
You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
um,
It's rooted in something. Yeah. It's definitely
yeah.
rooted. And then, like you said, it depends on the relationship. So if I'm, or we can go to people pleasing, right? So if I've grown up, and this all goes back to boundaries, right? Like, did I have a parent who, if I didn't comply, they withdrew their love from me? Or if I had a parent who, if I didn't comply, they got aggressive, and so we people
Mhm.
please to prevent them for whatever negative consequence that is, and that carries over into caregiving, right? I got to
Mhm.
do everything right for mama because I don't want her to cuss me out, or I got to do everything right for mama, or because she
Right.
gonna shut down or don't want to talk to me. Yeah, it's definitely rooted in something.
Right. Right. Yeah, and like I always wish in those sessions, because I can tell that like people will bring bits and pieces of them, of these pieces of themselves into the space, because
Mm-hmm.
we do, I think, create a very comfortable, very like safe space for people to talk freely about these things, and all you get is like kind of support, right? Like reflection, affirmation, like from the group. And
Mm-hmm.
our own stories, our own experiences from which you can kind of learn and reflect. And so I think that's all super helpful. But often I am thinking like, man, it would be great if really everybody in this space could additionally have therapy.
Exactly. Uh-huh.
Because I think that each of us has something that's distinct, that is, kind of motivating some of these behaviors that are ultimately harmful to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And which means if it's harmful to us and we are caregivers, it doesn't benefit our loved one either, ultimately. You
Mm-hmm.
know, um,
Mm-hmm.
not, at least not in a sustainable way, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe for some short period of time you could do it like that, but like not in a sustainable way. This is a difficult one because I think it speaks to kind of like social determinants of health, like just bigger problems. But and it's not one of the explicit things that we were going to talk about, but it's something we often are talking about in prognosis. Um, what do we do with the folks where like we really identify, or they identify, maybe both, in themselves, like, oh gosh, it would be really helpful to explore this in a deeper way, through individual therapy? Or in some cases maybe it's that there are some like familial dynamics that are super problematic, and maybe it's that they need family
Mm-hmm.
support, beyond, like, we also actually have offered like care dyad support, with people who are early on in the illness and can still kind of meaningfully participate, as well as family support, but again, in kind of this support group model. So it's not group therapy, it's not individual or family therapy, but sometimes people actually do need to go deeper like that, right? Not even just as individuals, but sometimes as the family unit. But it's expensive,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not accessible to a lot of people. I know a lot of folks who have actually opted out, both in medicine actually and in therapy, who've kind of opted out of insurance coverage. You actually take insurance, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people are, for some legitimate reasons, they're deciding I don't want to be a part of that system, right? And
Wow. Yeah.
the issue is then, like, it becomes very inaccessible, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, like I know some great therapists, and a lot of them don't take insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, how can you work on those kinds of issues, like if you don't have access?
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. That's tough because then you're self led, and when you're self led, you may not be as successful. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean that is something to think about. Like how do you fill that gap of those who, can't access that service? Because and that, as a social worker, kills me, because it's like there's not enough of. I mean, that's what value in therapy does. But I take insurance, but it's like there's not enough of this to go around, to meet that need. So yeah, I don't even have an answer to that question.
I
Like
know. I don't either.
that's tough. It's so many. That can be a whole other session about barriers, systematic. Like healthcare barriers. All that access barriers. Yeah, it's
Hmm.
in the field in general. It's terrible. It
Yeah.
made me want to go lobby on the steps of the Capitol, like
Yep.
because it's a challenge. Yeah. Um, and now everybody on TikTok. Everybody want to do TikTok University and just tap into. That seems to be a way. I don't know if I, can fully promote that or not, but people do.
Yeah, I
Tap
get
in
nervous
on.
about that. It's like the
Yeah.
same thing in dementia, right? Like there are plenty of resources out there that you can find on the internet, but a lot of it is either like difficult to interpret, like for somebody who's not like scientifically or medically trained,
Mhm.
or it is not accurate, or it is deliberately, like trying to disinform people, right?
Right.
Because they're
Right.
trying to sell you the cure all for dementia, or
Right.
like what, right? Like things that are just not true.
Right.
I think it takes advantage or exploits people's vulnerability when they're
Mhm.
dealing with this disease, which is a really tragic and devastating disease,
Mhm.
for individuals who have it and for the people who end up caring for them both.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I also hesitate to like send people that direction because I worry that it's hard to discern like, well,
Mhm.
what is
You
actually
don't know what's. Mhm.
helpful and not harmful.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
um
Yeah, and then you watch some, and then you spread it to somebody else. So now the disinformation is being spread to other people. Like, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And
yeah,
then, like, how do you fact check? What people are talking about. You just believe what you hear, and then you roll with it, or how do you even
right,
validate that some of that is true? Yeah. So the fact
right,
that I go through all that process is like, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
everybody's a
I wanted to
therapist.
kind of bring us back to this question of like, when do you know that this is not enough? Like, I can think of the big ones, right? Oh, I have like severe depressive symptoms, and
Yeah.
like I'm showing up to this support group and it's helpful, but like, I can't even get myself out of bed. Like, it's, like,
Yeah.
so I'm glad that I'm not alone, supposedly, but I feel very alone. Like, that's an obvious one to me as
Right.
like a neurologist. I'm like, of course that person needs therapy in
Right.
addition.
Hmm.
But how do you really know for yourself, like, this is something that I really need to prioritize? And I had this conversation with a friend of mine who's a therapist, and she's like, a lot of people say they can't afford it, but then you see what they spend on, right?
Mm.
And she's like, and it's not for me to judge how people spend and how that makes them feel and whether that's helpful. But if this is really important to you,
Is it a priority? Yeah. Yeah.
is it a priority, right?
Hmm.
And so I'm like, how do people know when to make it a priority?
I mean, but that's subjective. I can't answer that. Like that's subjective. And then it's also like I feel like that's a whole other conversation too. Stigma. If I
Hmm.
go seek some, So here we go. The perfection. So let's say we're dealing with the perfectionist caregiver, right? I'm not gonna want to go to somebody else because then I feel I'm looking weak or I'm looking like I don't know what I'm doing if I ask somebody for help. So it's like there will always be a pool of people who, have a lack of awareness of where they need to be. Now, for those who are willing to, those who are self aware,
Right,
I think
right.
some of the signs, some of the smaller signs, I did a TikTok video, but I'm legit. I can do a legit TikTok video. Um,
You are a therapist and you see
yeah,
clients, yes.
my information is legit. But what I was saying, um, smaller signs are overwhelmed,
Uh-huh.
overwhelmed, and also irritability. So when you notice things are starting to kind of nick you and kind of nudge you a little bit more, then those are signs that things are building up.
Hmm. Do you talk a lot about prevention too? Like in our support groups, obviously people come to them. I think they're most motivated to come to them when they are feeling actually overwhelmed, right? Like they're like,
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
also when they're feeling not only overwhelmed, but like nobody is helping, like it's, it makes me mad, it makes me frustrated, it makes me disappointed, all of these negative emotions. And at least I can come to this space and like talk about that. And it has to actually like kind of reach a threshold, I think,
Yeah.
like bothering
Mm-hmm.
them for them to show up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but once they're with us, I think we are often talking about those things you can do to prevent burnout, right?
Mm-hmm.
To do things proactively, to plan so that you're not facing things, in the moment and reactively, having to do something about it, but that
Mm-hmm.
you'd already kind of anticipated things that we know happen in dementia, for instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like over time, these things you should expect the person is going to lose their capacity over time to make their own decisions. You
Mm-hmm.
need to have in place those legal and financial documents that allow you to easily assume care for them on those matters,
Mm-hmm.
right? Things like that. Do you also in individual therapy talk about prevention? And does that look any different than what we do?
Not really. I mean, because like you said, by the time they get to me, it's reactive anyway. So it's like we're not talking about prevention at this point. And so if you think about it, really, the process is again we're thrown into it. So a lot of times we're already once we're a caregiver, it's reactive anyway. And so a lot of it's just coping through what's going on. But as far as prevention is concerned, I mean, when you're a caregiver, you're not in the prevention phase. So there's usually not any talk about prevention. But when we talk about things preventing things from worsening, then yes,
Right.
how do you take care of yourself, all of that. How do you get support, all of that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
This conversation like brings a couple of things to mind. One is about like the nature of suffering, and
Ooh,
like each of us, it's hard to judge other people's situations and their
yeah,
suffering, right? Their situation, like each of us suffers in our own way, and I think it's
yeah,
like, I don't know, it's important to be conscious of that, I think. And to kind of like honor that, honestly, like
mm-hmm.
I find myself sometimes feeling like, well, this suffering isn't legitimate because that person is suffering more.
Worse. Mm-hmm.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that that's right. I think it's no, each of us suffers in our own ways. And I think that we need to deal with that. Like we need to contend with that. The other thought I had that's related to that is like, we do like a lot of, we end our sessions, our caregiver support sessions, every session with some mindfulness, like
Yeah.
visualization, like breath work. And I think it's been personally very useful to me to be more aware of like how my body
Mm-hmm.
feels,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like when something happens, to just be like, okay, before I react, let me be aware of
Yeah.
how upset my body feels,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's really helped me a lot, I think, to have more awareness of that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something also that you think is valuable in like that deeper work that you do as well?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So when we talk about things being rooted, when they're rooted, they're in your body too. When we go into a whole conversation about trauma and in your body and how it stores and you know and so yeah, I mean, so when we go back to prevention, we're reacting to what's going on, but also prevention, of emotions getting worse. Yeah, what does that do when you feel your heart beating? That's a sign, right? When you're getting sweaty, your hands getting clammy, that's a sign, right? When I start, getting restless, I'm feeling just kind of this itch where I can't keep myself still, that's a sign, like. And
Right.
so prevention in that sense, as far as like, noticing when your body, there's a shift in your body. Yeah, sure. That matters, yeah. And so then you
Yeah.
implement that breath work, or that I like to do the hand on your heart. Like I'm safe. Or the hug. It sounds corny, but like we need that touch too. So yeah.
Yeah.
Or any kind of movement, of course. Yeah.
Right. Right. Um, Yeah, that's super helpful. I don't know if there's anything else that I have missed in terms of like what are some other signs that we want to be aware of. You shared some really great ones. Um, yeah, I don't know. Or is there anything else that you would want to talk to our caregiver audience about?
Well, I mean, I know you had a question about a culture, community, and what how important it is to connect with your culture and people of your background, and That's important too. I mean, not that the job can't get done in a group or in therapy if you don't have someone with your same culture, a part of your same culture. But I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about, what I've seen is the impact. It can get done, but if someone is a part of your cultural background, the level of impact, and then when we talked about vulnerability earlier, like the level of impact that it has to know that you hear me, you understand me, you have some similar experiences, like, and again, you can get that outside of, a cultural space, but there's something about knowing that you feel me on a whole nother level,
Yep.
right? And so that breaks walls down. That causes people to, knock down walls, and then there goes vulnerability, and the level of impact there is just is huge.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely feel like that. And I have to say too, it's like a very intuitive thing. It's not
Yeah.
explicit, right? It's
Right.
just like literally showing up to a space where someone looks like you might have some shared background, or they say something, or they say it in a way in which you're like,
Mhm.
I think there is like some connection here,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
it doesn't even have to be explicitly stated. Like
Yeah.
it just feels immediately so much more comfortable.
Mhm.
I had these conversations super early, actually, with caregivers when I was trying to get an assessment of like what is out there, because I'm not one to be like I need to reinvent something, or like so,
Right.
so I was like, I think that from the conversations I've had, that what exists in the way of support for caregivers, like this kind of support, right,
Mhm.
is really not very consistent. It's not, in many cases, very credible. It's not, yeah, there's a lot of room for improvement, in other words.
Yeah.
And when I talked to some caregivers, what they mentioned to me specifically was that they had actually, in fact, gone to support groups that do exist in the community, and they didn't feel comfortable for the reasons that we just spoke of, right? It's that
Mhm.
like the people in those groups were not like them in terms of like shared heritage, or maybe language
Mhm.
preference, or right.
Right.
And so while they could communicate, they could relate to some things about their experience, and they did appreciate that they aren't technically alone, that these people
Right.
also are going through something similar. There were
Right.
just so many aspects of their experiences, both like the what is it, what's the word for it, the reality of their experiences, and then also their perceptions of what
Mhm.
was happening, where
Mhm.
they didn't relate. And they were just like, ultimately, I didn't feel like it benefited me enough, because
Mhm.
there wasn't enough connection.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and, and
So you hit
precisely
a
the ways that
wall.
you're talking about. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I was like, wow, that's powerful, right? It means
Yeah.
that there is really an opportunity here to like create community with and for people, where you can connect people to each other, that where they do like feel, I don't know, like a familiarity,
Right.
just a comfort.
I was
um,
gonna say that comfort. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, and I always say, like, healing is relational, and I'm like, how is it possible to heal? If healing is relational, how is it possible for that to happen when you don't
Yeah.
feel connection, right? Like
Right.
with the other people.
Right.
And there are levels of connection, like I said, like these
Right.
individuals who had gone to these other sessions before had mentioned, like I did feel connected at
Right.
some level, right? But
Right.
um just not as much as I could have, and they didn't feel like they benefited enough to make it worth me to make that
Make it work.
worthwhile.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So have you felt that also, like with your clients, that you feel like greater connection with people where you have like kind of shared heritage, where like um do you think actually, ever, just out of curiosity, that it doesn't work to have that kind of shared background, or it's always uniformly a very positive thing?
It's always, always,
Yeah.
always. Yeah. Mhm.
Yep.
Even from a spiritual aspect too. On all levels. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
um it's so important. Yeah, this is why I think we've been really intentional about building the kind of the community support team that we have, the community health workers, our social worker that we have also, and our executive team also. Actually, we're like, from the backgrounds, that we're interested in working with, because we're like, each of our communities in our own ways is like really struggling with different things, whether that
Yeah.
is like we don't see enough people like us in medicine, and also in like in any kind of health anything, right? And
Mhm.
like, so that makes it a real struggle for us to like get through this illness where you have multiple touch points with people in those systems, and we don't see ourselves reflected in the
Mm-hmm.
people that are supposed to be caring for our loved ones and for our families.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's that they can't even talk to them because they don't speak the same language, or they can't even access them in the first place because of their immigration status, or you know what I mean? So it's
Yep.
like all of these different challenges, I think, when we start like incorporating kind of the diversity of heritage that we have, right? And when we have therapists like you who are working with, people from, different parts of the community that ordinarily don't see themselves reflected in
Mm-hmm.
the people who care for them, right? I think that's where you start to really make a difference. When we talk about things like these, racialized health disparities, we're like, well, these are like kind of the ways that we should tackle those issues. And I'm like, really, the fundamental way to tackle those issues is to empower the people from those communities
Exactly.
to do the work,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm. It sounds good from the top. Yeah, but what does it look like on the bottom when on the foot on the ground? Yeah, with your feet on the ground. Yeah.
that's
Mm-hmm.
right. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And you were, I think before, you're right now geographically in Pearland, I think you said, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. So for those of us joining us from other parts of the country, Pearland is like the greater Houston area in Texas. Um,
But
Texas is
I'm
especially,
virtual, so I tap in. So I'm licensed in Georgia and Texas to practice. So I
that's
see
right.
I'm still in Georgia. I built my business in Atlanta initially, so yeah.
Amazing. So yes, everybody be aware who's in either Georgia or Texas that
Yeah.
Charisse is available for individual therapy. Do you also do other kinds of therapy or just individual?
Just individual, yeah. I mean, I can do, family, whatever the client needs, yeah. Because essentially, the goal is to serve the whole family unit because it's a family issue, right? It's
That's
not
right.
just the person with the diagnosis, it's not just the person, it's a family issue. So,
Yeah.
sure, yeah. Support groups. I'm getting ready to do workshops, so be on the lookout for those. So yeah, it's time to make a larger impact. People need us.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's so important, the work that you're doing, and we need more of you.
Right.
It would be really great, if people took more notice. I think I'm a little bit concerned actually that what do they call it? They call it the silver tsunami, right? Like I'm
What's that?
concerned that that's the word that phrase that a lot of people use. I think maybe they're policymakers who use that word, but it's like this anticipated aging of the
Mm,
population that is
okay.
just going to kind of wipe us out because we're not prepared for it.
Mhm.
And I'm like, but we've been talking about the silver tsunami for, I don't know, like decades or something, right?
So
And
long.
like, so we could have prepared. We could be preparing, right?
Yeah.
I
Right.
think you and I are preparing, I think.
Right. Right.
But, yeah, there's just not enough people doing this work, and I think it's super, super important, and, like, I don't know, it just has, like, intergenerational impacts, like, the caregiving, I think, really will have consequences for people who are our age, right? Because
Right.
we're doing so much of the work. It's like
Mm-hmm.
people in their, like, 30s to 50s right now.
That
We are
sandwich
doing
generation. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're doing 50% of the work. And what does that look like? It means that we are giving up our own aspirations. Our whole professional trajectories are changing because we have decided, often for very good reasons, that we want to be the ones to show up for our loved ones in this way.
Yeah.
Right. But then systems around us need to accommodate that. Right. Because ultimately, as I always am telling our caregivers, you are doing such an amazing, vital service for your family, but not
Yeah.
for your family. You are doing something that is vital for society,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like you didn't choose to be here. I didn't choose to be here. I didn't choose to be the daughter of this person, that who might
Yeah.
end up having dementia. We know none of us chose that, right?
Yeah.
But we can make a choice about whether we're going to show up as a caregiver.
Yeah.
And that choice, I think, has huge implications in our families and beyond. And there just isn't enough support that acknowledges that,
Yeah.
right?
Come on with the empowerment. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just
Yeah. Empower the people.
like, anyway,
Yes. Yes. We need that empowerment, man, and that's what these our services are about. Like empowering the caregivers, empowering the family unit. Because
yep.
you feel alone, even though you come to groups, it's still something isolating about it. And so, yeah, you got to empower the people, man, because it's a tough journey, and
Yeah.
but we're not alone, and that's the biggest piece. And so, if we can empower each other and empower, like you said, most of all, the people above that can step into this space to meet the need of the people in this population. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for the moment, I'm like, what we can do, right? What we do have direct control over is building community with one another in the way that you
Yeah.
mentioned at the very beginning of the session, which is like, who is a part of that community? Who is a part of that natural support system in this moment, and how can you expand that system?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think when nobody comes to help you, you have to help yourself, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think in the meantime, this is what we're doing. Like you and I,
Mm-hmm.
this is what we're doing, right? And the caregivers that are building this with us, that's what they're doing as well. I wanted to ask you one other question. It kind of connects to the experiences of some of our caregivers, which is, and I don't know how often you've dealt with this, but I know that you do remote work. So, I mean, you may have seen this with people who might be in other places. Do they themselves uh, have, are they struggling with a long, like the long distance caregiving experience? Does that bring any distinct challenges to the, you know, the well-being of the person who is actually caring for them when they're not actually physically with their loved one and they're trying to manage them from afar? I don't know if you've had those clients. We definitely have had some people in our groups that are not actually physically with their loved ones, either not in the moment because they're not that dependent yet. They're just
Yeah.
early on in their disease, or it's because they are maybe, you know, the primary caregiver is someone else, or
Yeah.
they're in institutional care.
Mm-hmm.
Not often that. Most of our people are caring for them. They're caring for their loved
The
ones
regular.
themselves, or someone in the family is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
I was
have
thinking
you had
about
that?
that. I was thinking about that just in the context you just mentioned about if they're long distance, it's typically someone closer that's doing it, so they're not yet quite involved until something happens and they have to come down and yada yada yada. But what I've seen is if it's long distance, it's because someone else is already kind of tapped in as the primary caregiver, so it's not as impactful because you have somebody that's more hands on than they have to be. But I
Yeah.
mean, as far as the worry that comes with that too. Like I'm not there and back to guilt, right? I was talking to a friend at church and she was a caregiver from afar, but her sister was closer. And so when we were talking
Mhm.
about my journey with my mom, and she was sharing that with her dad, and after he passed, and some of the things that she felt because she wasn't able to be more hands on and things like that. And so yeah, that's another level of guilt and stress that comes with not being as close as you like to actually walk through that process with them. And like wondering how can I, support them way from afar.
Right.
Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
see it often, but it's people out there that, but it's usually because there's somebody else that's closer.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other question, I guess, but I don't know if there are any questions from our audience. I can't actually see that on my screen right now, but um, I wanted to ask you something because it's something that we actually had been working on recently, and we'd talked to our caregivers about providing them with this journaling guide, which I think can be really, really helpful, like to like help you reflect on like what is going on and the meaning of it and the purpose
Yeah.
of your caregiving journey. And um, is this journaling, meditation, as we discussed before, kind of like breath work, like all of these different kinds of practices? Are these things that you also incorporate into individual therapy? Do you think that they're things that can be done like completely like self-guided? Do you think it's better to do it with someone else? Like, what do you think about all of that? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're new to it, I mean, journaling is just journaling. You don't really need. Now, when you're talking about breath work and things like that, a lot of times you need to be kind of guided through that. And of course, you can always access that in, Google. And I tell my clients, stay off of Google. But anyway, yes, you can. You have access to these things, but it's nothing like having that experience of someone guiding you through that and helping you understand when to apply those things too. Because I can have tools, but I need the wisdom to also apply those tools. And
Yes.
so, that therapy piece is kind of to help you navigate through learning the wisdom and when how to apply those. But yeah, those tools are definitely accessible and useful without, a professional, especially journaling for sure. Yeah. I
Yeah.
love a good journal because, I'm just reflective like that anyway. But yeah, I mean, documenting what's going on, but also documenting feelings. Yeah, journaling is amazing, especially guided journaling too, because for the caregiver, you like, I don't know where to start. There's so much going on.
That's
So,
right.
guided journaling is definitely a start and helpful and useful without outside of therapy. Yes.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's super affirming. Yeah, like
This
the
is
group.
a
I don't actually journal myself, but I
I
think I
journal.
Yeah, I am very reflective, but it's all in my head, and I think it's
Yeah, you
through,
got to
like,
get it out. You got to get it
I
out.
know. And then I think it's really through conversations that I have. So I'm like
Oh, okay.
constantly sending friends like my what I call personal podcasts. I'm like
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
10-minute recording on WhatsApp. And we'll go back and forth on these things. And so I think that helps me to just kind of express my frustrations and like how I'm integrating what's happening in my life. And like,
Hmm.
so that I guess is some form of what you're talking about. But yeah,
Yeah.
like writing, I don't know, like I, I've struggled
It's
with
something.
writing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something about, you know, this swirling stuff swirling in your head, swirling in your head. You have to
Yeah.
let that out. That's a release in itself. We talk about coping skill,
Yep.
especially for anxiety, because your anxiety is your mind is running. It's running, it's running, it's running. So I always encourage my clients, even task wise, writing. If you can't sleep at night because you think about what you got, write it down, because when you release that from
Mhm.
your mind, it's something about just letting that out. It's helpful. It's useful. Also, not so task oriented or feelings, and so however you want to do it. I think a lot of people get hung up on how to do it. It's just like, just do it. You can either have a
Yep.
guided one, you can do the freestyle, you can do a task oriented one, but just write, because there's a release. Do you know Dr. Caroline Leaf?
No.
She is a neuroscientist. And she actually, I got to plug for, oh, can we see this? Switch on
Yep.
your brain. And so
Oh,
she talked about directed rest. And so she talked about how when we actually take intentional time to focus our thoughts on something, how that increases your chances of a happier outlook on life. So we need that time of introspection, because it helps your brain, or it helps
yeah.
your mind rather, not your brain. But in that book, she talks about, like, the role of our thinking on our dysfunction, and how she talks about the separation of brain and the mind, and how the brain doesn't impact the mind influences the brain. And so the more healthy your thinking is, the better you function, because you can actually reroute, even down to DNA based off of your thinking.
Interesting. I'll definitely have to check her out. I've never
Yeah,
heard
check it
of
out. Check it
her.
out, Doc.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good. It's a good book. It's good.
Yeah.
It reflects on the power of thinking. Our thoughts are really influential.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, I've had so many conversations with people about what is it called? Behavioral activation, right? So like
Mhm.
people who have anxiety, depression, it's like such a powerful intervention, just like understanding what it is you're doing and how that impacts what you're thinking, right? And how that then will impact ultimately what you do, right? And it's
Mhm. Mhm.
um
Mhm.
yeah,
Your thoughts, your feelings, your actions. So what
that's
I think,
right.
then I feel, and then I do.
Yep. Yeah. No, totally. It's so powerful and it's so simple. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Right.
just like it's
Right.
like very obvious, I think, once you like read about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
We're like, what does that
yeah,
look like in real time? Yeah, because sometimes you don't realize until you did something. You're like, oh, whoa, wait, what happened?
right.
How did I get here? Right.
Exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. Well, yeah, thank you so much. I hope that this has been helpful for the caregivers who have joined in, like during the call. I hope that or during the session. I hope that those that are reviewing this afterwards are also like thinking about the ways in which we can really utilize individual therapy, other kinds of like formal therapy, above and beyond support groups, right? Which I think each brings a very distinct things that are helpful, right? To be engaging with both, which you will have learned during this talk, I think, or during this discussion. And yeah, I don't know. I think we'll definitely have to have Charisse on in the future.
Yeah.
I'm
Bring
very
me. I got lots to talk about. We got lots to talk about.
exactly,
Hmm.
exactly. Um, I'm very excited to have you here. It's like it's
Thank
so
you.
awesome to have people in the community who are working, in these spaces, like specifically for caregiver support, because I think too few people are thinking about how we can do that well.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for the work that you do,
Yeah.
and thank you for being here with us. And I
Yeah.
guess we'll see you
Thank you.
next time.
Thank
Yeah,
you for having me. Thank you for having me. This was exciting. I'm excited. It's so much work to do. It's so much work to do. But
yeah,
having these kind of conversations is the start. So
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Thank you guys so much.